As a pastor, it's not often we have an opportunity to make close friends in the congregations that we give leadership to. When I graduated from Bible school back in 1981, I took my very first church in Carneys Point, New Jersey. It just so happened to be the local church that my wife had grown up as a child. Of course, the expectation of the pastor's wife was certainly she'd play the piano for worship services. Interesting. I knew my mother played the piano. My dad was a pastor, and she played the accordion, and I understood that that was often an expectation. But for Karen, that was a problem. She didn't know how to play the piano. Of course, naturally, they suggested, well, we'll pay you to take some lessons. And those of us who are musicians know that's not exactly how it works very quickly. So the first year in the church there in Carneys Point, we really struggled with musicians. Occasionally, I would reach out to my sister-in-law that was in a neighboring church in Bridgeton on staff with my father and ask her if she would fill in. And that's where Michael came into the picture. We met him for the first time. I can't remember how he might have learned about our dilemma. I know he came from the Episcopal Church in town, but he began to attend our church, and soon we learned of his musical skills, and the rest of it's history. It was so nice having someone sit down at a piano in our morning worship, evening worship, sometimes Wednesday, accompanying our orchestra and our congregational singing. And so soon Michael got invited over to our home for a meal. It wasn't very long until he became a very close member of our family. As church began to grow and people were coming to Christ, we were thankful because our circle of close friends began to grow, like from Mike also to another man called Bob, who later pastored that church, and then Ed, who now serves that church as a vice chairman, and then Kermit, and he also serves the church board. You know, I never knew as a pastor I could have so many close friends in a church at one time. In addition to supporting our musical needs, Mike would often vacation with us in the Outer Banks down in North Carolina. We took a lot of trips together, and we remained very close friends. But almost all of our conversations and time together were driven toward becoming a greater disciple of Jesus Christ. Weekly, we as men would often go into our community and we would share our faith with the new guests that would attend the church. After 10 years of pastoring in Carneys Point, our family moved away to Allentown, Pennsylvania to pastor for almost 20 years there. However, before I left Carneys Point, I had the privilege of officiating the wedding ceremony of Michael to a woman he loved named Norma Hudson. Michael remained playing the piano at that church in Carneys Point for many years to follow. In 2010, my wife and family returned to our home in Bridgeton, where we had met and left for Bible school and are called to ministry. But now we were back as their lead pastor. It wasn't until about 6 months ago, Mike and Norma had worshiped with us in Bridgeton. My wife, who was singing on the worship team on the platform, she mentioned to me as I walked over there, she says, "I think that's Mike and Norma sitting in the front." It wasn't until prayer time after the message around the altar at the close of the service, I looked up and I walked directly toward the two of them sitting on that second pew. Yes, that was Mike and Norma. We hadn't seen each other in such a long time. I no longer had a full head of hair, and Michael had aged quite a bit. I was not prepared to hear the very first words he spoke to me. He said, "Would you speak at my funeral?" After I sat down in the pew in front of him, I was thinking to myself, what on earth is he talking about? I don't know that I've ever had anyone ever say that to me before. He said, "Well, since you married us, I thought it was only right to have you speak at my funeral." And then he made us aware that he was diagnosed with an illness, that he didn't know how much longer he would be around. A very short time after that, I learned that they moved from Pennsville to Williamstown, New Jersey. And then the next time I saw Mike and Norma was actually at my wife's funeral near the end of September this past year. I was not prepared for that either. Life is a blessing. I've always been grateful for parents that chose life. But eternal life is a gift. It's something we must receive. And when we accept Jesus Christ into our life at that moment, we get the privilege of one day spending in eternity with him in heaven. We'll probably ask ourselves when we get there, why do we take so many vitamins to keep us from remaining longer on the earth? However, until that day that he calls us home, we have to remain faithful to the Lord. And we have to finish well. For the sakes of the Karens we love, the Michaels we know, and the Jesus Christ we serve.